Hey there again. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to make our illustration. I'm going to make my own, but you can do whatever you want at home. Just try to follow the basic steps we've learned before, and we can start drawing. The first thing we're going to do is to establish the lines that make the division in thirds. Do you remember? We had to generate 4 main points, right? Well, to do this, divide the canvas in 3, horizontally and vertically. In the second attention point, I'm going to quickly draw a sketch of the wheel. Seeing as I know that this is going to be one of my main elements, I'm going to draw the horizon line and establish the vanishing point. From here, we can take the lines and put all the objects and scenes in perspective. From this point, I'm going to run 2 lines that are going to define the road that my drawing is going to take, and I'm going to establish where the wheel's feet are going to go. Remember when we were discussing different planes? Well, I'm going to draw a series of first planes. I want my drawing to have first planes where the viewer is sort of leaning over to see the scene. To draw the buildings on the left, we just need 2 vanishing lines. This is because the buildings are put behind others in order. I'm going to continue drawing objects launching vanishing lines from the main point. Now that I know that I'm going to draw the bucket of water that's next to the wheel, I need to know how to put it into perspective. So I'm going to use the vanishing lines to establish the base. Even though I don't need to leak the lines of the mountains, I'm going to run them to the vanishing point anyway, so that all the attention goes to the points. So to speak, we're telling the viewer to look to the horizon. Now, for example, I'm going to make an object on the first box that I have here in front in the first plane. This object is going to vanish to the second point that I'll put more to the left. Remember that when we make an object that's turned around, we have to use the second point. I'm going to activate the references again, and I'm going to place them up here to define the drawing a bit better. Looking at this reference right here, I'm going to draw the bucket of water and the wheel. I'm going to look well at the first picture that I got as reference to draw these objects. When we don't know how to draw the objects, it's good that we just go back to our references or use real photos. In my case, I use photographs in all the references, but you could have used any other artist's illustration. It all depends on your criteria. Now that we have the base of our sketch drawn, we can add in more details with some things. We can get elements that we've drawn and give them a little more detail and a little more structure. For example, here on the left, I'm going to draw a large poster. To do this, I'm going to put a line from the left and draw the poster. I don't need to use perspective for this. I just use the frontal plane. This plane will be behind the boxes in the first plane. It's important to keep our planes in mind at all times. We need to know where things are positioned and from where we're going to see them. More than anything, when we start to paint, we have to keep the level of depth in each of the planes to paint them in one tonality or another. Light is a great influence. If you need to, you can hide your references to be able to draw a bit more freely. The references are just anchorage points to lean on every now and then when we need the help. They're not necessary to have 100% of the time, but it's always helpful to have them at hand. Okay, so now I'm going to lower the opacity of the drawing I've done. And what I'm going to do is draw a little more details on top with a new layer. It's going to go on all the things I've drawn. This way we can add a little bit more richness to the drawing before painting. Keep in mind that you don't need to draw everything and define a lot more now because we're going to be painting with long, fat strokes. For now, we can simply draw a guide to paint over. But we'll use it just as a guide, as our brush is going to be playing a major role. Sometimes I like to run lines a bit randomly to see what happens in the drawing. I just make strokes that I think coincide well with the drawing and the composition. And from that I get like more stains or like broken fabrics. All these kinds of details can help us to enrich the drawing. Of course, we have to follow a pattern, but to make random lines on a determined point can help you to find things in your drawing you didn't know were there, and they really work. At the base of the box that I've drawn on the box in the first plane is really helpful to draw a bottle right now. As I know where the base is, I just have to draw the curves and make the bottle's shape. I'm going to put the rest of the drawing process on fast forward so you don't get bored watching me, you know? Just this, really. We're making some small details in some areas. I'm going to define the wheel as much as the bucket, but very over the top. I'm not going to define them exactly, as if I was doing like an ink work. I'm just going to do it to have a guide when I start painting. Now, I'm going to join the sketch layers I had before. I click on the two layers, right click, and join layers. Now we just have one. I'm going to lower the opacity on this layer, and I'm going to create a layer underneath to paint our drawing. I'm going to select a large brush and give the whole scene a red color. This layer is going to be filled with the paint bucket. Now, in each of the different layers, I'm going to be painting the different planes. Remember that the further away we are, the more clarity. And the closer, the more darkness. It's just because we have the sun at the back and because we want to generate a counterlight in the first planes. Okay, so to paint the first plane, we're going to select a darker color. I'm going to paint the first plane and everything in it with this dark color, including the bottle and the strip we have here at the right. Within this dark color, we can include more combinations of darker tones to give the drawing a bit more character. We don't really need to do that right now because we're working with a base. However, now we're working with color. It doesn't really mean much, as we're going to put all in black and white to see the tonalities properly. Now we're just going to get a general idea of the color we're going to use in our drawing. As I painted the background and the first plane in the same layer, what I'm going to do now is separate them. We just have to select with the lasso tool the areas I want to separate. I hit Ctrl C to copy it, and I can paste it on a new layer. This new layer will have in it what I've just selected, that we can erase from the last one. Now, to paint in the intermediate elements, we're going to use some more brown tones. Brown because that's the way we've chosen it. A little clearer than the ways we have in the first frame, getting progressively more as the elements get further away out of our sight. If we have any areas that look straight at us, like the legs of this structure, we can make them a darker color, as they're in counterlight, as the sunlight comes from the left and from the top. We have to have the light source always in mind. If we have an interior scene, we'll surely have a lamp or a position light point that we can direct the light from. In this case, as it's general light and it's sunlight, we have a direction, but the tones are going to be a little more dispersed. If you look closely on the wheel, I'm going to use a clearer color than the one we used on the bucket, and progressively more and more. Every element that's further away will be just a little bit clearer in color. When we put everything in grey, we'll be able to see how it actually works. What's more, when we have our drawing in grey, we can correct some of the areas if we need them to have more clarity or more darkness. Sometimes it's a good idea for you to take away the line just to see what you've already drawn. You can do it in any moment. You can take away the visualization and put it back whenever you want. Look, it was just a trick. In this way, you can see what you've drawn and correct the points that you'd like more or less. When painting the mountains, I'm going to use a color that looks a little too much both like the sky and the background below. This means that the taking away the line trick is going to be really helpful for us. In fact, this way we can see if we made the right choice in tone or not. I'm going to give a little more clarity to the sky. To do this, we're going to go to the sky layer, and with Ctrl U, I can open a window of tone and saturation. In this window, I'm going to give it a little more luminosity. Always use the line trick we mentioned before whenever you feel, to see if you've got the colors at the back. It's important for the colors in the first plane and the back one to contrast between each other. As you can see, I'm now painting the poster in a similar tone as the water bucket. This doesn't mean that they're on the same plane exactly, but they are on a similar one. Let's take out the line to see the real differences in these planes. Lastly, we're going to add a clearer tone to some of the clouds in the sky. This way, we can give a little more luminosity to the image. Okay, so now that we have the base drawn, in the next lesson, we're going to desaturize all of the image so we can see all of the tonalities in gray. These tonalities will help to visualize the planes better. I really hope you've enjoyed this lesson, guys, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye!